For those of you who are here for the first time, I do a shipping show showing like the ins and outs and tips and tricks for shipping on Tuesday nights, and on Thursday nights I do a new streamer, new seller kind of checklist type show. So that's tonight is obviously shipping. So let me fix the things we'll be covering tonight. Are gonna be really. First, we'll be going over kind of the new stuff that's changing, and then we'll kind of get into the nitty gritty of how to successfully set up your stream for success when it comes to the shipping profiles and everything. So the first things we'll kind of go over, like the things we'll be hitting up tonight. So the first one is a shipping profiles kind of section. Second will be like your default shipping settings. And then the third one will be kind of per show settings. So these are kind of the three layers of shipping within Whatnot. First of all, we'll go over kind of the changes that are happening with USPS. So the biggest thing is that Ground Advantage actually is going to be going down in price a little bit, which is awesome. Flat rate currently is not going to go away, but it's going to default to $12.99 at your cost, or for the customer's cost. It doesn't really matter how that goes. But that's only until the 1st of November at this point. They may end up changing that up a little bit. We don't know yet. They're going to be subsidizing. So if somebody buys a $9.21 box from you and they're doing flat rate, you'll eat the difference between $9.21 to $12.99, but it's actually like $15. So they're still eating like $2-3 of the flat rate shipping. If you end up using the wrong packaging, it'll come back to bite you. It's a $20 fee supposedly per package. So it's something to consider whenever you're doing your packaging. Make sure you're using the proper boxes for the proper service that you're doing. The new rates under 4 ounces is going to be around $4.50-ish. 4 to 8 is $4.80. 8 to 12. You guys can see it on the screen. But essentially, you're kind of capped on Ground Advantage till about $7.75, which is up to, I think, a few pounds. I can't really see it on the screen right here. It is up to 2 pounds. Up to 5 pounds, it looks like. And then over 5 pounds, you're really going to be in a position where priority makes the most sense, or priority flat rate. It's really important that you kind of understand these changes, because if you're not pricing and weighing and measuring and setting your settings properly for your items, you're going to be eating a lot of shipping costs here coming up. First, we're going to start off with, like, a lot of people kind of get into Whatnot, and the first thing they do is they set up a show. So you do have what are called the per show settings. So these settings are your settings for a specific show. So when you start a new schedule and you haven't done anything, you haven't been in Whatnot very long at all, this is where you'd set your settings every time you did a show. Matter of fact, probably the first 20 or 30 shows, I went in here and set this up every single time. We'll go over a way to also get past this. But the thing you can change per show is pretty much who pays for the shipping services, and the free or pay option. So you get to decide how that works. Key thing to remember is when you make changes to your per show settings, that applies only to that show, not to any future shows. If you do start a stream, you can't go back and change any settings for the show. It is set in stone after that. And all the shipping profiles are set on the listings, and you'd have to create them in your show while kind of live, and it's not really the greatest. Oftentimes I do what's called default shipping settings. I set it up once and apply it to all my future shows, and it allows you then to set these settings and not have to deal with them again, because they'll be default for all your shows. And then you only change when you need to change versus always being default settings. The main thing here when you're setting your default shipping preferences are that you choose the shipping service you need, you choose who pays for the shipping, if you allow pickup or not, custom shipping profiles if you do have them for that show, and then applying to all your scheduled shows too. So you set it all up right then and there. You set up your shipping profiles here too. When you set them here, you can actually modify them a lot more than if you set them up with on the fly. When you set them up on the fly, you don't have to get to choose very much on the size of the box. And you don't get to choose as well for the auto bundling feature. Shipping profiles are per listing setting. It really drives what your shipping costs are. It drives how you bundle, and it's important, I think, to set up the profiles for the things that you are selling. Let's go ahead and go to Whatnot real quick and look at a setting. So here is my personal account, and if you look here, we are in the Seller Hub. And so the way to get to the shipping profiles is to click on the menu at the top right, the three lines, and then scroll down to shipping settings, and then go to shipping profiles. So in here, you would set up your custom profiles. For me, I have like a 2-pound item that I max out at a 15 by 15 box that doesn't allow you to add on any more items. So in this particular before I lie, let's make sure that's what, oh, up to only 2 items. So in other words, you can get 4 pounds in this 15 by 15 box. And this is for very specific toys that I sell occasionally, action figures, where I know that I can't really fit more than 2 of these in the box. And it's because of their size and also their weight. It just doesn't make sense. And then I set up my shipping box dimensions here. And that way, whenever somebody's buying something, they are paying the proper amount. I think it's really critical to understand that. Is, to me, I'd rather have the right amount that my customer's paying every time. That way they're not overpaying and paying just for the sake of paying, and also you aren't eating the cost. So finding that sweet spot is really kind of critical. Another thing to set up, and this is a really important one, is your giveaway sticker. So oftentimes when you do a giveaway, you get charged the shipping, obviously, when that happens. Oftentimes if you don't have first class turned on to begin with, this doesn't work. But if you're giving away, like let's say a trading card game, or if you're giving away a sticker, you don't want to pay $5 to ship a 20-cent sticker. So you need to set it up as a giveaway sticker. I created a profile for this called giveaway sticker. Put it at less than an ounce, 0.5 ounces. Save your settings here, and when you do that, when you set up your show, you're going to have to turn on first class, or this won't work for the giveaway stickers. Same thing with card singles. So what I do here too is I set up a profile for card singles. That way they can ship out with the appropriate size box. I do a 6x4x3 for about 50 cards, 60 cards. So I can know that that's how much it can fit in the box, how much they can weigh with it whenever they're in the top loader. I know what the weight is and everything all together. It's important. And then singles is like when you're selling a single card. This is my personal, obviously, shipping profiles. You'd set up your own. The other default settings you have here, so this is again your defaults, is your domestic shipping. So anything under 3 ounce, if it is a flat, you can set it up as a first class letter. And you have to have this turned on if you're doing a giveaway. If you don't have this turned on, you can't do the giveaway for the cheap 73-cent shipping. So it's important that you turn this on. I choose priority mail over flat rate here. So if you want to do flat rate, you would turn that on here. And then 5 pounds and over, again, you would do flat rate, priority, or ground. Ground is usually your cheaper option and usually does pretty well. If you look down here on the bottom, there's a new checkbox that says also apply to scheduled shows. So then if you set these settings, you can check that box and save it, and all your future shows are going to have these settings, which is a really killer feature if you ask me. And then here's where you would set up your shipping costs, where I personally still keep it a buyer pays all shipping. We'll go over the 921 thing here in a minute. Here's where you would set this up and change this setting. So that was kind of shipping profiles in a nutshell. It's important to understand like what the shipping profile does for you is it lets you really hone in your shipping costs, your label generation, your service selection, and your bundling, your smart bundling. We didn't go over bundling, but we'll go over that here in a minute. The benefit of suggested versus custom is if you are lazy and you just want to make it work, you do the suggested profiles. You don't really weigh anything too much. You just kind of know the generalized size, weight of your item. Or you set up your custom profiles when you know exactly what the things are and they're going to be consistently the same every time you do it. The benefit of custom profiles, in my opinion, is that your buyer doesn't overpay for shipping and you never really undercharge for shipping if you really know your items well. If you're not consistently running the same items, then this may not work for you. We went over earlier how to do the shipping profile, so we'll go ahead and move forward past this one. Smart bundling. So now we'll go into smart bundling. So smart bundling, if you leave it alone and you're using the default settings for the shipping profiles, it automatically caps out at, I believe it's 72 ounces. And that 72 ounces is, I want to say 5 pounds before it starts over a new box. And if you're letting Whatnot manage the auto bundling and you are using just the regular profiles, more than likely, if you're doing it pretty okay, I've done it many a times where I end up with a box, let's say it is 72 ounces. 72 ounces, then it goes to priority. I'm sorry. It still would go above that. My bad. To ground advantage, forced, or whatever your settings are. If you let auto bundling do its thing and you're using the default profiles, if you don't know the item's weight specifically, and let's say you're doing 4 to 7 ounces and it's going to add 7 ounces every single time for the item when you sell it, but let's say it's 4 ounces, well then you get 3 ounces that are added on. The customer keeps on paying for those extra 3 ounces with every item they buy, and at the end it ends up saying, let's say 230 ounces overall, and you weigh it and it's 140 ounces because those 3 ounces added up like crazy when they're buying a ton of items. They overpaid for shipping. As a customer, I wouldn't like this, and as a seller, you're not really doing your diligence, in my opinion, and creating a good environment for your buyers to be satisfied and happy with you. If you set this up properly, you can kind of know the best way to do the custom profiles and then know how to do bundling. Let's look at bundling really fast. Let's use one of the ones that I have, one of my profiles, and I believe it's Magic Cards. This one, I know that every Magic card by itself is not even 0.2 ounces. Very, 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 very light. If I sell a bunch of Magic cards in a stream, I don't really want to get up to that 3 ounces where it goes to a ground advantage card if I'm not using that many cards. It takes 14 cards to equal about an ounce for what it's worth. So I know that with at the 0.2 ounce It would take 5 lots of cards to get me to a full ounce. If I can stay under 3 ounces, that means I can get 15 cards in an envelope in first class this way. So what I can do is set a fixed weight down here for additional items in the same package, and I can also set the maximum number of items. So the first thing I would do is I don't want to fit more than 15, so I would say maximum number of items would be 15. Okay, so that way I'm forcing the bundling to be the way I want it to be, and the dimensions you can leave alone if you want. And then the weight, I know the incremental weight is going to be 0.2 every single time, so I put 0.2. I save this, and it's gonna now, when I go to sell Magic singles in the future, it's gonna immediately put them bundling together at exactly the right amount for me to ship them out in an envelope. And then my customer can get 15 cards for only $1.38 instead of paying $4 minimum if it goes to 3 ounces before it's actually 3 ounces. Really important to set up kind of your threshold of max items, and you're adding on to your add-ons to the next level of adding an item. What's it called? Before I lie, weight for each additional item. You can, if you set it up this way instead, just doing the weight adding on, it'll automatically go to the next size box. It doesn't matter. But if you really care about the number of items in one package, let's say it's a heavy item, 4 or 5 pound item, or it's just a large item. Sometimes the action figures, I have like the play sets that are not heavy at all, but are large, like really, really big. I don't want to put 2 in a box. I don't want to potentially mess it up. So it's important to set up your bundling. So this is overriding the auto bundling and kind of creating your bundles the way that you need them. Now, the important thing is if you're selling these items, make sure that it's like for like, so the profile matches the item. And we'll go over that here in a minute too. It's really critical to do that. So that's the auto bundle feature. So now the 921 thing. So for whatever reason, this really messes up a lot of sellers, and I don't know why, because it's actually pretty darn simple. And that is, if you set the 921 max, your customer will not pay more than $9.21. So your customer never pays above 921. If it goes bigger and bigger and bigger, you are going to pay the difference in that, not the customer. That's really the biggest thing to think of. I know it sounds obvious to me it is, but for a lot of people, they get really hung up with this. If it stays under 5 pounds, essentially it stays at that ground advantage 775 price point. Okay, as soon as it goes to the next above 5 pounds, it will go to the 921 max, and then it's up to you end up paying, I forget what the max is for that 921, but it's actually costing you a little bit more than 920. It costs you $9.69. So you're already going to pay 50 cents ish more, and they're going to be able to go, I think it's 7 pounds or 9 pounds before it's another problem. So it's important to know that 921 isn't like you get it for free, they get it for free. There needs to be some strategy to what you're doing there. I personally don't use $9.21 max shipping. For me, I've found that the few times I've tried it didn't benefit the buyer for some of the things, like specifically with cards when I sell Pokemon or Magic. And then if I do it for myself, it didn't benefit me for like the bigger action figures things. So she asked, I sell clothes. I used the default shipping last night, and someone bought 2 items. They paid $10.96 for shipping. Should I have had the $9.21 option listed? So you could have done that, and then they would have only paid $9.21. You would have paid the difference, the $2 essentially difference there. You would have had a happier customer, and in the end, if it ended up weighing less, you wouldn't have had to have them pay any more money, and you could have not had to, like let's say you do the auto setting for 12 to 15 ounce, I want to say, and you had it for 15 ounces, and they ended up being together less than 30 ounces. Let's say it was 14 ounces. There we go. So 14 ounces is 28 ounces, so it ended up being like 22 ounces. That doesn't put you in a lower or higher category, so the price would be the price, I guess you could say. But if it did end up lowering you to a different profile, which would be the 12 to 15 and then 1 to 2 pounds. So let's say it stayed under a pound somehow, which it wouldn't be with the 14 ounce, obviously, in this scenario. But let's say that was the case. Then you'd actually, the customer paid too much money for their shipping, and you don't get any benefit, they don't get any benefit. Oh, it was only 14 ounces total. Nice. And what shipping profile were you running? Like the 4 to 7 ounce or something? Yeah, so in that case, you would have still been charged the $10.96. They would have paid the $9.21. You would have paid the difference. So it probably wouldn't make sense for you to do the $9.21. But if you're doing smaller clothes like kids' clothes, it'd make a lot of sense, because you can fit. I just shipped, I do a lot of baby clothes on Vinted. For my kids are 5 and 7 now. We're finally going through all their baby clothes and their 3T, 2T clothes. And I was blown away at how much you can fit kids' clothes. So if you had kids' clothes, it'd make a lot of sense to do $9.21. They would bundle up to $9.21. They may end up paying, costing you $13, $14 in shipping. That means they're buying a lot. So how's that a bad thing? You just pay the difference in shipping. That's not that big of a deal. That's where 921 makes a lot of sense. But if it's heavy, doesn't make a lot of sense. It really doesn't. It makes more sense to stick with ground advantage, in my opinion. It's a preference thing. You can kind of figure it out, play with it a few times. I wouldn't take a risk of a show where you're planning to go out selling 500 items at the 921 max and expect it to work out good both ways. Little people figurines, not the play sets, just the characters. Oh, those are super, super light. What are those? Those are probably under 3 ounces, but you wouldn't want to have first class turned on for that show because you can't ship that in an envelope. Yeah. So you would have to turn off first class for that show, because if someone buys only one, you're going to eat the difference of 78 cents. What is it? $3.78, I think. So you'd end up paying $3 in shipping. If you only sold it for $2 or $3, that would kill you. So you'd have to turn off first class for that show to make it really sense. Plan on not giving a giveaway, and then set up the max weight of the little people. And then you could, it would auto bundle if they buy more, and they would only be paying for what they're actually getting. So 1 to 2 ounces is, yeah. So if they end up only buying one, they paid $4.47 to ship that one item, even under 4 ounces. That kind of sucks. So they'd want to buy more than one item to make it make sense for them. And I always, by the way, I chat with the people the whole time, letting them know, hey guys, the very first one is going to hit you because there's no such thing as an under 4 ounces. That doesn't make sense at like $4. That way, everybody who adds on kind of gets the vibe that, hey, I'm going to have to pay for this to work out for me. I'm going to have to pay up on the first one, and then after that it's cheaper. So free shipping, to me, I would do free shipping only whenever something's under an ounce. So like the playing cards, individual playing card singles, do the free shipping, because you're going to pay, even if they go big. If they went big and you had $2 starts at a minimum, and they bought, let's say, 70 cards or 80 cards, like, you're not going to mind paying the $4 in shipping, because that's $80 in revenue from that stream. But that's really the only time. What about when Whatnot gives the customer free shipping? Oh, so as long as you have your shipping profile set up right for that item, I see what you're saying. They're using like a promo. As long as you have the profile set up, it'll pay for the shipping, and you don't have to pay anything. So there's no problems there at all. So the next thing we'll talk about, and I think someone asked about this in the last show, and I'll definitely go over this. It's kind of like when everything's said and done, you've thought you set up your profiles correctly, you set up all of your show correctly for the items you wanted to have, you have ground advantage set up, blah blah blah. You go to print all your labels, and you go to set up packing slips, everything like that. You go to look at your items, and you see that if you were to use the actual dimensions of the box and the actual dimensions and weight for the item, you end up in a position where all of a sudden, wait, why is it $145 fee to ship this box? And it's because the smart bundling wasn't too smart, especially when you're using default profiles. It defaults everything to a 12 by 12 by 12 box. So if you're selling 10 things, it won't fit in a 12 by 12 by 12 box. There is dimensional weight too. So it's under 131 inches with a length times width, length plus width plus height. So like all the way around. If it goes over that amount, you're going to pay a lot for shipping, like way too much for shipping. It's really important to know when it makes sense to unbundle to fit into smaller boxes. So real quick, I will put on my camera now, and I'll show I just did. It'll be kind of a bad example of it, because I don't think I have any that fits the bill, but we'll fake it. We'll make one look like it goes. So I just sold a bunch of magic cards a little while ago for the fun of it, just to have something to show you guys when I'm done. So this particular customer bought 8 items in this show. Okay, so if I go here and I go to edit the item, we're going to fake this. It's going to be wrong. They paid for 1.6 ounces. So this is going to ship to them in even though it shows 12 by 12, yeah, for some reason it must be because of the cap of items, but I'm shipping cards, so most of these people are going to be getting an envelope 11 by 6 by 0.25 inches. Let's say that I change this and somehow I messed up and it's 400 ounces, okay? When I go down here to see what the price of the difference is, it says it's $47 in different price, which my label allowance doesn't allow me to go that big of a thing. The label allowance, the 5 you get it free a month, only really applies to, I think it's like $5 or less per item. And also it does not apply, if you didn't know, it doesn't apply to insurance either. So what I would want to do then is unbundle this shipment. So that way it makes more sense for me to get this to the person without having to pay out the butt for shipping. And the way you do that is to click edit, click on the person over here once, you click on edit, and then it's still got this on. Let me cancel that. Okay, so now you have all the items here. There's an option here that says unbundle shipment. So now you choose your items that you want to separate into a different box. And when you do it, okay, I did 4 of my 8. I click unbundle. It's going to tell you now if you unbundle those, what your difference will be charged for shipping. So if you looked a few minutes ago, say I was going to pay $45, but if I unbundle these, there's no cost to me to unbundle, and there's no difference in price. It's $0 for shipping for me to pay any difference. So these 4 cards would ship for 0, and the other 4 cards would then be left alone in their own bundle. So I'm going to go ahead and unbundle this, okay? And then it's going to create now 2 different items for this guy. So this user, I'm not going to show their names, guys. I now have one at the very top, which just got created, which now went to a first class. And I have my original one, which also now changed to a first class. Now, if I were to go here and look at my, there's no charge for this. This $0 to ship it as is, which would be in a first class envelope. And I go to the top one. Let's look at it real quick. It also would be, it also would be no charge there too. So there's no charge for me to do these 2 bundles. I'd have to actually click on edit for this to work. Edit. If I leave it alone, it's no charge for shipping here too. So what my additional shipping charges are now gone by unbundling versus keeping it bundled. This was a bad example of it because it wasn't like a crazy one. The last Tuesday night I had a really big example of it. I sold like 7 pounds of squishies to one person, and that, pushed it over. So it's a good example. This is what you would do. And then here's the other thing. Let's say you screw up and you realize when you're all said and done that you actually want to rebundle these. You can actually come back here and bundle selected items. So I selected both of the items on the left, and then I'm over here to bundle selected items, click confirm, and then it'll show me now what my pricing will be for the bundle. I click on edit and see what it is. Look, it went back to a regular package, and for whatever reason, it's a 78 cents a label adjustment cost, but it'll use one of my my label adjustment costs for this one, which is still better than paying $45 or $20 or whatever the price difference would be. What about when the box itself is huge for the item? How can I do that beforehand and not an adjustment? Okay, that would be in, if you go to your Whatnot account again, you would go to this is an example of that, this top one here, the 2 pound 15 by 15 by 15. So default is 12 by 12. So I would create a shipping profile for that really large item. And in the settings here, you set the weight and the dimensions. See, there's a box size down here. You set your dimensions down here, and I went 15 instead of 12. That way, you're charging appropriate shipping for that item. Does that make sense, Kelsey? But when you do that, I'd recommend not setting this setting here together, because the fixed weight for additional items, because what ends up happening is if you set fixed items, weight for additional items, it creates the very first shipment that may bundle with this will get charged that 15 by 15 by 15 box. It happened to me not too long ago. So whenever you apply that, when you sell something in the wrong shipping profile, which happens every once in a while, and so then they end up not buying it, and you don't realize the wrong profile is selected, and you don't know why they're not buying it, because it says it's going to cost $25 a ship, something like that, But this is how you do it here, is in another shipping profile, and you do one for dimensional. So after you set up all these settings up here, you set box dimensions, and you do a custom, and you'd set up your dimensions here. That's how you do it. Flat rate makes a lot of sense for some sellers. You're selling something that like a perfect example is if you're selling something that's always going to be this dimension, and you can fit 30 of these in a box, then you'd set up a shipping profile for this, and all of the max amount of items would fit in a flat rate shipping box, and you are not going to overpay for shipping. The customer's not going to overpay for shipping. Everyone will be happy. If you have random sized items and they're not going to fit together, then you might have an issue with flat rate shipping. Let me tell you my hack for shipping profiles and how to make everything really work for you the best. I pre-weigh, when I'm doing items that are different sizes, I pre-weigh everything, and I pre-size everything, and I keep tubs around me, and I put everything 4 to 7 in a tub, everything 8 to 12 in a tub, everything 12 to 15 in a tub, everything above a pound in a tub. And then I create not a shipping profile, but I call it a selling profile. And I'll set up a selling profile with that shipping profile attached. And then I remember to switch back and forth between different shipping profiles while I'm selling. That way, if you're doing pools, like this is the way to go. If you're doing temporary listings, I think they're called, this is the way to do that. And then you never really get in a situation where you've got the wrong profile for the item. This is a really good example of this. Is a couple of weeks ago, I was on an Invictus stream. I don't know, like 30 watches like an idiot. And then they had one of these cases pop up, and I'm like, oh, I'm gonna buy one of those cases. That's awesome. And I didn't notice that while I got it only for $9 or $12, the shipping was $23. And it's because they set up a custom shipping profile for this item that only applied to this item, this shipping item. Then I paid the premium, but it shipped by itself. It didn't ship with anything else. Yeah, so I paid retail essentially for it. If I would have went to the store, I would have paid the same amount of money. I guess the benefit there is I didn't have to go to a store, and there's not an Invicta store near me or anything anyway. So yes, you can. What you do is you set up multiple temporary listings. You name your temporary listing. So I go through and I'll set up multiple different weights in the thing. As a matter of fact, I'll show you an example of that. So I did this show tonight, sold some Nitos, and if you look at my here's my profiles. So I have a large squish. This is everything a pound or bigger. I have a medium squish. This is 12 to 15 ounces. And then I have a small squish. This is 4 to 7 ounces. And I set up, these are all temporary listings. And they all let me sell in these different shipping profiles per listing. And then I just have to remember when I do this every time to switch between my selling profile. So that way it's not, that way it doesn't mess it up. It's a really good way of doing it. Let's go over some tips and best practices real quick. Make sure you weigh your items. You weigh your item with what your packing supplies and your item will cost together. I'm sorry. That way you know what your final weight is. I think a lot of people mess up by weighing a nice cube Nito and it's 7.7 ounces and they go, oh, I set it for 7 ounces or whatever, or it might be like 6.9 ounces, whatever. And then with the box and the tape and the padding, it's actually 8.2 ounces. So you end up being over every single time and not knowing it. So weigh your item in the box it's going to be in. Make sure you review your settings before you go live for your show. If you set your default settings, it shouldn't change, but I always look at it personally just to make sure. Make sure you make any changes you need to do before here at the end of the month to your default settings. Matter of fact, every time you open up Whatnot lately, it's going to be popping up on the screen telling you, hey, there's shipping changes coming. Make sure you set your default settings. That's where you need to do that before the 31st. I said it earlier, but always be chatting about the shipping with people, letting them know that, hey, the first item is going to be $4, but after that, it should only be 78 cents per one, 68 cents adding on. Set up custom profiles when you need it. Yeah. So Kelsey, the way that I do that is, let's see here. Do I have something as an example? Okay, look. So this is my 6 by 4 by, I think 1.5, two box. And let's say that I'm selling a Pokemon slab. So the box does weigh like 0.3 ounces. And let's say this was 3 ounces. I would put the item in there, in the box, and then I go get the packing material that would make up the difference, and I'd weigh that together to come up with the weight. Then I would set up my shipping profile. This is a perfect example of the T, where's it at? The card singles, this box right here, card singles box. Say we'll turn off the max shipping, but I'd set a fixed weight for each additional item. So even though it's 1.6 ounces for the first item, after that 1.6 ounces is the box and the card together, okay? But what I do is, then I take out this card and I weigh it by itself, and I then add that here to my incremental weight at the very bottom here. So 1.6 ounces is the box with the item, and every incremental item that's in this shipping profile only would be only 0.7 ounces, okay? When I do that, card singles are gonna default to 1.6 ounces, and every extra card is gonna cost a 0.7 ounce towards the tally, instead of it being 1.6 every single time, because it isn't actually 1.6 every single time. But let's say you did this wrong and you only knew it was the 0.7. Throwing out the window the 0.9 ounce from the beginning. Whenever you have small items, it matters a lot that you get this right. So you just pack it all up, weigh it. The auto bundling feature is kind of junk, but if you do your custom profiles right, the auto bundling feature works really, really well. Yep, so this is a quick recap. Per show settings, default settings, shipping profiles themselves, the buyer cap itself, and then the flat rate shipping. So these are kind of the things we went over tonight. If you guys have any questions, definitely reach out. Not a problem. I recommend buying the slide deck if you don't. Not a problem, but it is a great little tool. It'll take you to I'll show you. It'll buy you. Right now I have it on this website here. So this is what it'll take you to. Would be my webpage, whatnotfees.com, which is also, by the way, shameless plug, a free tool to kind of get the fees, what your items are, to know what you're taking home. And there's a calculator that you can actually put in which category you're in, what your sell price is. If it's $50, $7 shipping by the buyer, and 50 cents in $5 in taxes, and your cost of good was $22. It'll tell you your net profit, your margins, your commissions, everything here real quickly and easily. If you use Whatnot's inventory tool, you can go to upload inventory and upload your inventory for your show. And if you have your prices in there, it'll actually tell you your margins based on your starts, and you can kind of know how you'll do on the show ahead of time if you're using that. It's a pretty cool little site. It's real simple. Doesn't have to be complex. It's real easy to use. But if you look at the top of this site, the Shipping Tick Show, which you just saw, and then I have also a New Sellers Playbook, which is another stream I'm doing, and also it has a password. But for those two shows, there's two different slide decks you can buy depending on which one you do. So that's pretty much it, guys. If you guys have any questions, definitely don't feel bad reaching out. It doesn't hurt my feelers. And whenever you first log in with the with the link. It'll take you here, and you'd click on this button with a little that button right there, and it'll take you full screen. You can read through all these slide decks that we went through tonight. So simple as that. Real easy to set up. Thanks everyone who joined in. I really appreciate it, and hope everyone has a good night. And feel free to reach out anytime, guys. Not a problem. Not a problem at all. Happy time selling, and let me know if you have any shipping issues that come up. Peace out.